Evening all, welcome to the Pyramid Podcast where three lads discuss all things English football pyramid. On today's episode, we'll have a look back at the action from Monday Night Football and the FA Cup replays. We've got a special guest on the podcast to talk all things statistics in football. We'll look ahead to the weekend Premier League action, including Aston Villa versus Man United and West Ham versus Arsenal. We'll preview the key games from the EFL, including Ipswich, West Brom, and a manager change at Blackburn. We'll reveal the answer to Tomo's trivia question, and we'll finish with Laura, who will talk us through Yeovil's upcoming trip to Tonbridge Angels. I'm your host, Alex Murphy. Once again, I'm joined by Tom Gallagher and Tom Lawrence. Tomo, really only one place to start after your Foden captaincy on FPL on Monday. Obviously spoke about on Monday's pod. You said it was a bit of a slip up from you not doing your team, but ended up paying huge dividends for you.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes that just happens, doesn't it? You forget to do your team, but it works out better for you because you've not done any tinkering. Actually, my missus did exactly the same. She didn't do a team and had a right go at me when we both sort of acknowledged the fact that we didn't do our teams. She accidentally captained Ollie Watkins, who got 3 assists and a goal, and I accidentally captained Phil Foden, who got 3 goals. So saved my game week, albeit when I had a look at our mini league, every single one of us has got Phil Foden in their team, just whether or not you captained him or not. So yeah, ominous stuff from City though. They look very good. Brentford, tough place to go. I know Brentford did a double against them last year. I think they're the only team to do that. So yeah, good win, and it's starting to look very ominous for the rest of the Premier League.
Yeah, it is. I have Foden in my side, and I didn't captain him, so it's one of those things where you know that other people in your league have captained him, and you're buzzing that he's getting points, but at the same time, they're just gaining points on you each time because of the captaincy. But that's FPL for you. But I just thought it was an absolute embarrassment of riches that they've got now at their disposal. Haaland started, Alvarez started, obviously Kevin De Bruyne started. They brought Doku on. Grealish isn't even getting on. Phil Foden now looks like prime Phil Foden. Bernardo Silva, it's just embarrassing what they're capable of and the players they've got at their disposal to bring on. Boys, have a little look at the FA Cup. Laurie, I want to come to you first about Leeds. Obviously, Leeds went through against Plymouth. I know you've spoken about concentration firmly being on promotion for Leeds, but now we're starting to get to the latter stages of the FA Cup. Would a championship side like Leeds start to think, hang on, we got half a sniff here?
Yeah, I think for the first time in a long time, I'm taking the FA Cup seriously now. I think when you get to the latter stages, that's when you can start getting a little bit excited about it. And yeah, I mean, it was quite funny actually because Plymouth did really well. They were a good side and they sort of equalled us for large periods of the game. And then we just brought Somerville and Rutter off the bench and we won 4-1 in extra time. So I felt sorry for some of the locals at Home Park. They probably thought, oh, right, this is what the real quality in the Championship looks like. And it was quite funny to watch. But I'd be, obviously, from this point on, the further you go into the tournament, the more exciting it gets. And to see the Leeds fans flood Wembley would be good if you could get to the semi-final. But first and foremost, of course, the league is the most important thing. But we're flying on all fronts at the moment, so exciting times.
Yeah, and Laura, obviously we spoke on the last pod about Morgan Whittaker being top goal scorer in the Championship. Did he play in the FA Cup tie? How did he look?
Non-existent, to be honest with you. I thought we were way too good for them on the night. He didn't actually play right up front, just played in behind Hardy, their number 9, who's quite a good player normally as well. But on the attacking front, pretty muted, I think Plymouth were, and obviously we had the strength in that area, and that's why we won the game by 4 goals. So yeah, not his night, but he's got a lot more to give, and I reckon he'll be at a Premier League club next season.
Just a bit of news today I saw on Leeds, I think, as well. Is it that Bournemouth are going to take up the option to buy Sinisterra? Is that 20 mil coming in for Leeds? Happy with that?
Yeah, I think it's what we bought him for. So he was kind of touted as a one of the rats leaving a sinking ship in the summer. So good riddance.
So, Tomo, one other game from the FA Cup just to talk on. Chelsea at Villa, I must admit, didn't give Chelsea much of a hope, especially after what we spoke about on the last pod and the pressure Pochettino was under and how Villa are at Villa Park. But looks like Chelsea absolutely dominated and ran out worthy winners.
Yeah, it was definitely their best performance of the season. They completely dominated, played some good football as well, especially that second goal. It's a sweeping move and Malo Gusto's cross in for Nico Jackson, who looked like an assured sort of prime Didier Drogba, like heading in that ball. But this is the thing with Chelsea we spoke about all season. They've got quality players. It's just maybe the wrong mix of quality players. And what I mean by that is basically all young quality players, all young players with potential. So you're gonna get weeks like this where it all comes together. A little bit like, say, the Man City game. I know they didn't win that one, but they were brilliant, weren't they, when it was 4-4? And then they'll get weeks like the Wolves game where it won't click and it won't come together, and it just, the blend of that squad just still doesn't feel right, even though, look, last night was a great performance and they fully deserved the win. I was a little bit disappointed in Villa, to be honest, but maybe they've got their eye on other things like the Conference League. They'll be favourites for that. And obviously they want to get into that Champions League spot in the Premier League. So not too disappointed, I guess, given I guess they'll play less games now.
Yeah, the only thing I would say on Villa is I looked to see if they played a bit of a weakened side, and it definitely wasn't. I know Ezri Konsa's got injured, who's massive for them, and that could be a long-term injury. But it looked like, obviously with him out, Ming's still out, they still had a really, really strong side out. So maybe a glimmer of hope for United at the weekend, but we'll come on to that later. FA Cup will be back, though, I think the next round's later in this month. So we'll obviously cover those games as they happen. Right, well, delighted to say we've been joined by a special guest for this part of the podcast, Dave, aka Statman Dave. Dave, welcome to the show, mate. Thank you for coming on.
Cheers, great to be here. I've got a lot of knowledge of Premier League, European football, but you asked me about Wrexham, don't have a clue, or Yeovil Town to put that in context as well. Sorry, guys.
You don't want to stay on and do our National League South roundup then?
Look, I'd love to say that, yeah, I can get involved, but unfortunately, it's just, it's not quite, I've not quite gone down to those depths yet. I've had a look at I think I looked at the National League North for a team about 2 or 3 seasons ago. That was when Gateshead were really, really good. And they've got a few players, obviously, that play in league football now, but unfortunately, no, the knowledge isn't quite there.
No, it's better than most with that knowledge. Most people who listen to the pod will know who you are, Dave, from being on Twitter and following football, but just want to do a quick introduction about you and what your role is.
Well, I like football, watch a lot of football. I'm an analyst on the BBC podcasts with Chris Sutton. Cesc Fabregas is a new one on Peter Crouch podcast back in the day. So he just talks shit on football, and from a stats perspective, that kind of like and tactical analysis, just diving into those types of things. So yeah, a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, so Dave, I met you, I don't know what it was, in your Squawka days. Must have been 8-9 years ago, was it? And as we both know, Squawka is a stats-based company. And I just wanted to know, even back then, did you think that you were going to create a niche in this sort of industry for yourself, where you were content creating about stats, or?
I think it's one of those things where sometimes in life, opportunities or doors kind of open themselves up. And obviously, from working for a startup, I always had that idea that I wanted to have my own business. I wanted to be, an entrepreneur, which is a really like sort of weird term, but at the same time, it's probably describes what I do now. I've got lots of different businesses to do lots of different things. And I think there was always a love of football. Obviously, I grew up watching Manchester United, season ticket holder when they were good. 2005 to 2011 was when I was kind of going with my mum week in, week out. And it was one of those things where I always thought football was always going to be a passion. From a sort of mathematics background, I could have been a banker, could have, gone down that line. But I think it's really important to do something that you really enjoy. And obviously, Squawka was a great entry into that. And I got kind of lucky in a sense of used to do be a data analyst, used to be a product manager, and I kind of slipped into this YouTube talking about football. Yeah, I was a little bit mouthy in the office, and I think that's kind of like grew it up. You've got to be strong with your opinions in football and kind of stick with certain ideas. So kind of got the a bit of a breakthrough there, and then after about a year and a half doing that job, kind of quit my job in London, which is a bit stupid looking back on it, but I suppose it gives you that bit of fire to start your own thing and build up your own channel or your own business and stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at now. It's been a journey, to say the least. That was 8 years ago, I think, when I quit my job. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, over the course of that time, Dave, obviously you said you've gone out self-employed and solo, but probably now one of the more recognisable content creators in football industry, YouTube, social media, last time I looked, 420k followers on Twitter, 380k subscribers on YouTube. Just have you sort of noticed that there's been kind of demands or scrutiny or criticism that's come along with that, and just how you've kind of dealt with that, really?
Oh yeah, people love to hate, don't they? I think that's kind of part of the game. I think for me, it's all about bringing that kind of knowledgeable side of football. It's more of an education. It's not as reactionary, let's say, as maybe a fan channel or someone that wants to kind of make a name for himself. So it's never been that bad, to be quite honest. I never had that much of people being angry about what I'm saying. It's quite difficult, if it comes from a logical position. I find that you can't really annoy too many people, but of course they're people, and I think you got to have rules on social media. If someone says something that's too bad, you're just going to block them, and then that's it, done. And I think that's something that people should really utilize a lot more. It's kind of, you have a policy. If someone goes too far, then that's unfortunately that's it. As content creators, we're creating content, and if you block someone that can't see the content anymore, that's it. That's the game. So it's a difficult one. There's always a time that you think you might say something that you don't mean, and people will take it out of context, and people build off the back of that. They make videos and whatnot. But at the same time, I think you've just got to make the content for yourself and for your audience. And just think, no, if I enjoy making a video, like at the moment I'm making a video on Manchester United, I spent the last day watching every single one of Man United's shots, categorising them, looking at all the situations they turn the ball over from a high turnover perspective, and then working out whether Man United were good or bad at pressing. And that's something that I enjoy doing. And the audience hopefully will enjoy that as well. Obviously, it's part of a bigger video, but it's that analysis where you're really going back and you're looking at what's right and what's wrong. And I suppose that's kind of where my heart is. It's not in a negative way. I'm not an angry person online. So it's very difficult for people to be angry with me. And if they are, it's just like, is it that deep? And I think that's the big thing. It's not that deep. We're talking about football. It's a game. It's a bit of fun. We're not talking about politics. We're not talking about, discussions where people are polarized. So yeah, I suppose it's just kind of doing what you love, backing it, and then if someone don't like it, cool. That's absolutely fine. There's loads of other people that can do similar things. You know what I mean?
Statman Dave, I want to ask you a question about stats, funnily enough. And we speak about them quite a lot on this podcast. Tomo's positioned himself as our Statman Dave, if you like. And I'm probably the one that scrutinises them the most. I know that stats have got a place in the game. I'm all for that. It's normally the context in which they use and the narratives of which they push, which irritates me the most. But there's one thing I want you to clear up for us, right? And that is expected stats. So expected goals, expected assists, expected points. I'll give you a little example, right? Now, I know you said your National League self-knowledge isn't what it could be, but mine is. I'm a Yeovil Town fan, so I watch them every week. We're top of the league, 10 points clear, game in hand, right? Runaway leaders of the league. Now, last week, an expected league table surfaced. So where we'd be on expected points. And Yeovil were third, right? We're 10 points clear with the game in hand, but in the expected league, we're third. And I'm sat there thinking to myself, if the algorithm that works out these expected points can be that wrong, what the hell is the relevance of it in football? Why is it used so much? And what are your thoughts on expected stats, Dave?
Because the expected stats will tell you about a longer term trend, and I think that's kind of important. I think that the other side of it is you can get players that break expected goals models because they're so good at finishing. Heung-min Son, Jamie Vardy are two players in the Premier League that just consistently break those models. And you've got to remember that it's based on maths, in a sense of it's based on the law of large numbers, where you'd eventually regress to your mean. And then it's the whole population of players. So there is more work to be done in these expected statistics, but they do have good correlation with league finish. They do have good correlation with how teams are actually performing. For example, if you look at Iraola, the Bournemouth manager, if you look at the difference between the expected goals that they're creating and the expected goals that they're conceding, you can really see the growth of them as a team. And obviously, we know as football fans that Bournemouth are actually a really, really solid team this season. They've got better and better as it goes on. I think the big thing is to make sure the context is there. And, from a National League South perspective, that XG model probably should be different to the XG model in the Premier League because of the quality of player. And that's where you start to apply Bayesian statistics on top of what the model is already in terms of taking what is the striker that's taken that shot, what's his distribution over his career and so forth. So I think they are great. I think they're a starting point that are good. I think from a recruitment perspective, they are absolutely incredible because you can tell whether a player is good or not by an attacker, let's say, by looking at their expected assist numbers and their expected goals numbers more than their just raw goals and assist numbers. It gives you more context. Like a player could have like 5 chances in a league season and score 5 goals, or there'd be a player that might score 2 goals but have a really high XG that's getting into really good positions. And it's a recruitment decision in that sense. Are you picking the player that's just going to score the goals and he's in form right now, or are you going to pick the player that's getting into those better positions? Because I'd say 9 times out of 10, you pick the player that's got a better, higher, XG in a sense of they're getting there, they're consistently having these shots and so forth. But I understand that it's a metric that's quite young. If we take how long has it been around for? 10 years? It's still quite young. It's still not where it should be. And I think that's the big thing. It's not the be all and end all. And going back to that kind of like the Man United thing I was talking about before, I looked at 3 different stats providers that had 3 different ways that were basically, when you look at the stats, it said Man United are good at pressing. As a fan, as an analyst, as someone who watches them week in, week out, I think they're absolutely garbage at pressing. And we went through and we looked through. The reason why I looked at like 300 and something shots over the last 2 days is because I was like, why are these stats telling me that Man United are good? Yet when I watch Man United, they're absolutely garbage. And they concede so many chances because of how open they are in certain games. And I think that's a big thing. It's kind of like the best stats aren't here yet at the end of the day, in my opinion. I don't think that there needs to be a lot more work done on it. And then you look at the XG models and there's still a lot you need to do on the XG models. So I think they're good for context. I think they're good for recruitment, but they're not where they could be in the future.
I'm glad you said that, because I agree with you that there's work to be done on the sort of progression of stats. And like you say, sometimes they can be bang wrong. That Man United example obviously being one. I do agree with the recruitment side of things. I think Brentford are a team that kind of started a trend a long time ago and used like metrics and stats of players. Like you say, which players are getting into the positions, like the Moneyball film, like taking a page out of that. Would that interest you? Going into like a recruitment type of stats environment, a job like that, and working for a football club, looking at potential signings and stuff.
Yeah, I think long term, the kind of the goal of life or the dream of life is to be Man United director of football. That's kind of where I want to go. And obviously that's a big dream, but in this world, look, you got to just back yourself in certain environments. And look, every day I don't wake up and think, oh, this is the day when I'm going to do it or so forth. But there's a lot of work that I'm trying to do in the background at the moment that'll be more employable for that field. And whether that's Manchester United in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, it's something that I would aspire to do. I think I've built up a decent eye for talent over my years. I think I've got a good idea and a good read on how managers and schemes and tactics and pressing and set pieces and all that type of thing works. So that's kind of like a long-term dream, is getting into the football side of things. I always had like a thought in my mind that at 35, I go, right, we're just going to go and work in football. But it's come round pretty fast. It's about 1.5 years away. So we might extend that a little bit further, sticking with the content for a bit further. But I've got experience working with clubs. I've worked with Premier League clubs on certain different things in football. So it's an aspiration for sure, but I think it's probably something that I will do. I think content is amazing and I love doing content. I think I'll always do some sort of content in it. But there's going to be a point where you are looking at working within the game, be it in England, be it in Germany, be it in wherever, Brazil. Imagine living in Brazil. That'd be absolutely fucking sick. And again, it's one of the things that football gives you a great ability to move. It gives you such opportunity, and that's why it's a great sport and a great place to be, because you can get that mobility in life and, you're doing something that you enjoy. I think there's loads of jobs that I could do, but maybe wouldn't enjoy anywhere near as much as what I do right now.
Yeah, it's good to hear, Dave, that you're informing your sort of stats analysis basically versus the eye test, because that's always the argument, is it, with the old school football fan when it comes to, I would call Loro a bit of an old school football fan, where he relies solely on his eye, and he has got a fantastic knowledge of the game. But where do you see the sort of the balance between stats versus the eye test? Because I think that's probably the most important thing with stats, is it backs up your previously held opinions, or potentially, like you said, with that Man United pressing example, it takes away from that opinion. Where would you say it's a 50-50 split between those two sort of styles of analysis?
I think that the first and foremost, I think you've got to have a feel for the game. I think the game is the most important thing. So I'd say if you were like breaking it down, like the eye test or watching a game or having your own analysis is the most important thing. And I think stats are great. Like you're saying, Tom, it gives you the ability to challenge something yourself or like think about something in a different way. And I think from that kind of like maths and stats base that I did at university, you have to sometimes like challenge what you think. You know, we have incredible bias in our minds. Like we all have bias when we watch a player. Like my opinion of a player will be completely different to your 3 opinions of a player in some aspect. So it's good to get extra information. I think that's one of the big things. You know, if you want to recruit based on statistics, it's a great way to build a bigger net. You're catching more fish versus you going and having to go to every game, drive to a game as a scout and go and watch, you know, the under-18s game in Norfolk, then you go into like Scotland and then you go, you know, it's a smaller net. Whereas if you throw the stats in, you're creating this massive net. And yes, there is still definitely a space for the analysis side after that, you know, watching a player and so forth and building on it. But I think it's a powerful thing that's going to only grow. And I think that's the thing. When you look at like line breaking passes or certain statistics, like when you look at the stats, you can tell when a player is elite. Like, for example, centre backs, right? We all know that the best centre back in the world would win every single one of their tackles, every single one of their headers, every single one of their duels in all aspects of how they play. They'd be incredible on the ball. They play out from the back. They break lines with their passing. You can build that from a stats model. Like I use Virgil van Dijk. I think it's 2018, 19. I use his profile as a profile to find players that are centre halves. And that's where the likes of Kanate, Upamecano, Sven Botman, like all these players had like similar traits to Virgil van Dijk from a stats perspective. And those 4 players are like completely different, but they're all really good with their own right. Like Sven Botman to Newcastle is one of the most biggest mockeries in the world. 35 million quid. This guy is like, we haven't even seen where he's going to go. Like technically, we haven't seen what he was doing at Lille, at Newcastle yet. There's still another level for him, but dominant in duels. And that's something where you can build that with each player. You could build that for a winger, you build that for a midfielder, bring that. And there's things that will be there. And then looking at it as a population of players, if you look at, let's say XG, for example, or let's look at goals, let's say. There's going to be players that are in this population of goals. The players you want to look at the top. And then why are they in that position? You know, does that highlight someone for you that you want to look at from a scouting perspective? Or is it something where you're like, okay, I've got a player on my team that does this. What does this player? Like, for example, if you spent, 2 days looking at Lionel Messi's goals in his entire career, I imagine you find insight in that. And that's kind of like stats in a sense of like you repetition. And then eye test comes in, you work it down. It's funny though, because I think the eye test thing is one of those things that gets chucked at me quite a lot. And if I were to sit down and go through a game of football with someone that says, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, I'd say they'd finished the day being like, oh, that was really interesting. That was quite cool. I didn't look at the game like that because I look at the game in I find quite a different way. And I suppose that's one of the things that's really important. Like I learned football before I learned statistics. Like that's the nature of it. I was watching football before I was doing like analysis. So there's like a level to it, but fair play. If that's the only thing people can say, then I'm living a great life. You know what I mean? Like, who gives a shit?
I was going to ask you that, Dave, actually, about obviously since you've been submersed in statistics, have you found that your enjoyment of football's like wavered at all watching a game, sort of thinking about it statistically? So maybe not like a game that you're working or like a United game, but if you were to watch a EFL game on a Sunday lunchtime and weren't working it, are you thinking statistically about the game rather than just watching the game unfold and trying to enjoy 90 minutes of football?
No, I think that the most important thing for like someone that wants to aspire or wants to be in like a analytics role or whatever, you need to make sure that you enjoy what you're doing. And there's times, I think I found this probably like when I was maybe 23, 24. I was going for a point where I watched so much football, like almost too much football. And it got to a point where it was like, you're watching like a 0-0 draw. And it's absolutely garbage. And like some people enjoy 0-0. Like there's some good 0-0 draws out there. If it's tactically interesting, loads of things happen, cool, absolutely fine. But there's some 0-0 draws that are garbage. So I kind of like live by the rules of I watch teams I want to watch. So like I'll go, let's say Atalanta. They always play good football under Gasperini. Or like Sassuolo are really good under De Zerbi. Or trying to think who I've been watching this season. Been watching Leverkusen this season under Xabi Alonso. So I try and very much watch the things that I want to watch for an enjoyment perspective. So it's not like that deep work environment, if that makes sense. So I'd watch Leicester City in the Championship. I'd watch Southampton. I'd watch teams that like do something different. And that's something that's quite important. I think going back to that initial point, I watched a lot of like garbage football and I was like, I'm a bit sick of this at the moment. And then Lewandowski scored 5 goals in 12 minutes?
Yeah.
And it's honestly really, really peculiar where you're like, I'm so sick of, like, it was Wolfsburg, Bayern. It was a garbage first half. Then Lewandowski comes off on at half time, scores that many goals. Like, okay, well, this is why we stick around for this stupid sport. And I think that's really important. I'd say that's one of my most, if you don't want to watch the Sunday 2 o'clock because it's 2 teams that just play garbage football, you don't need to. Go and watch something else or go outside or do something else in your life. And I think that idea of not having to watch stuff was really liberating for me. It really was.
Yeah, and so obviously, as you've mentioned, Davo, you're a big United fan, been a season ticket holder in the past. It's been a poor season to say the least so far for United. What's your main takeaways and sort of analysis of United and Erik Ten Hag this season?
It's tough because we've been rubbish. Like we've been really bad. And like the level of Man United over the last sort of 5 years has been bad. I think we had some really good times under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and really enjoyed that. You played really well against the big teams. But there's been so much that's marred that, like signing Cristiano Ronaldo again, like signing these older players. It's not really culturally what Manchester United should be doing. It's not culturally what United are as a football club. It's not. The attacking football is such a big thing. Erik Ten Hag's United have been absolute garbage to what they should be. The flashpoint, I think, this season was when he was fixating on being like, I'm not building a new Ajax here. You got the job because the Ajax played really good football and scored loads of goals. Yet Man United aren't scoring loads of goals and playing good attacking football. They aren't pressing well. They're not playing well against big teams. They're getting carved open by anyone. Defensively, they're all over the place. Saying all of that, I do empathise with Erik Ten Hag. He's had some garbage owners, a garbage director of football. The way that the whole football club has been run and internally and the failings of Manchester United have been apparent to everyone to see. So it's very difficult for him to do the job if, for example, like Mason Mount is a prime example. Mason Mount is a very, very good player. Man United should never have bought Mason Mount in the summer. Why'd you buy a player that's got 12 months left on his contract for 50, 60 million quid? The thing that comes back on that is he was an Erik Ten Hag signing. He wasn't. Like, okay, Mason Mount. Would you like Mason Mount? Yeah, of course. You buy Mason Mount. Why does anyone buy Mason Mount who's got 12 months left on his contract? I don't understand. 60 million quid that cost. So you can't buy another centre-back, which United needed. You can't buy a new left-back, which Man United needed. You can't get another defensive midfielder, which Man United needed, because you've bought basically a number 10 that Man United have got quite a lot of number 10s. You go on top of Anthony, there's been a humongous failing in the market, which we can all... I thought Anthony would be a lot better than he is. His off-the-field problems have massively, massively, massively affected him. It's something that doesn't get spoke about. Like that, like, he was a very, very good player at Ajax. He was a very, very good player in the last Champions League season he played. He was one of the best players in the Champions League. The off-the-field stuff has been massive. And if you want to look at that, like, go into Brazilian press, go onto Globo and translate the articles. It's absolutely insane. But, like, that was Erik Ten Hag's player. He's got to take the brunt of that responsibility. But Erik Ten Hag doesn't decide to spend 80 million quid on him. And that's what Man United had to do because there was no one else that they were looking at the market, which is absolutely insane. I could show you, that season, I could have showed you 10 wingers that are left-footed to play on the right-hand side and have these metrics of stats. And it's like...
Just on that, Dave, you just touched on Sven Botman and it being incredible, the deal Newcastle getting for him. You spoke about the stats that are available to probably, compare against an amazing right winger like you do with Van Dijk at centre half. Let's just say a Mahrez or something like that to give a top club these options for right wing. Why aren't clubs using that? Like we spoke about Brentford, spoke about Brighton. I've seen that Ineos have said that United are going to start to use data to make more informed decisions, and fans are sort of losing their mind about how much of a positive that is. Why aren't global clubs of that size using that when it's shown to be working so well?
You need to buy into it. Like, you have to accept it. And that's the thing. Like, football clubs are very old and traditional. Like, you're basically devaluing people's jobs because you're saying you can do something on mass, and people are afraid of that. Instead of what they should be doing is like, how do we make ourselves better with the use of that? You look at Manchester United, go and have a look at the guy who is the head of data science at Manchester United. He used to work in fashion. Like, I don't care how good you are at your job. If you don't, there's no point in knowing statistics if you don't know football. And it's evident. It's evident. Yeah, cool. You could be building the best database in the world. How are you supposed to communicate that internally? How are you supposed to communicate? And that is the problem with Manchester United, is a lack of real poor communication between departments. So that in itself is kind of like why clubs miss out on these players, because they think they've made the solution by getting a guy that works in fashion, or other clubs that may be afraid of data. You mentioned Brentford and Brighton, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal. All these teams at Newcastle, all these teams are doing very, very well, are using it. So if you don't use it, you're going to get left behind. Manchester United have been left behind. There's other clubs in the Premier League that have been left behind because they don't do it. There's certain clubs that just don't want to spend, are afraid of spending, have been burnt previously because they own other clubs in Europe and they've used data previously and then they didn't like the data. So there's this really weird complex in a sense. And I suppose it is about education. It's about the best teams in the world use it. So why are you not using it? The Red Bull clubs, Manchester City, the City Group, Girona. Everyone's talking about Girona being this brilliant example of something that's really nice in the league. Oh, it's not Barcelona, it's Manchester City. Just be honest with ourselves. It's a Manchester City team. How does that work with FFP? I don't even have a clue. How have they got all these players on free transfers or of low budget? Because it's part of the City Football Group. It's not a nice story. It's them using data to win La Liga and using their players and getting the right coaching that coaches in the City way. That's you should look at those examples as a football club and go, okay, right, we need to invest in this. How much would a data team cost compared to a transfer? £80 million on Anthony, right? I could build the best data team in the world. I could get the best guys in the world for 80 million quid. The smartest of smartest, the quants, the nerds, the people that love that shit. So you have to look at it from that perspective, and I suppose clubs don't like to look at it like that. Underpay staff that aren't footballers, and that's kind of consistent.
I was going to ask you about Anthony, Dave, and you've already touched on a few facts that you think might have contributed to him not possibly hitting the heights that we expected. But he did come from the Dutch league. So from a stats perspective, how do you translate someone that's doing really, really well in the Eredivisie with Ajax into knowing that those stats are going to come over and be just as good in the Premier League? Because obviously the competition and the opponents that they're facing are a lot different, and the Premier League is a lot higher standard. So obviously there's an element of risk involved in any transfer, but surely that gulf between leagues is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And how does that work stats-wise?
Really love to share my screen right now, but I'll try and hold it to camera. So this is the effect of it's completely gone the wrong way around. Basically, someone did an analysis on the expected metrics we were talking about before and how they change league by league. So if you name me one league that's come to the Premier League recently from an attacking perspective that haven't performed. Top 5 European leagues, there's one league that's gone from that league to the Premier League, and there's been a consistent level of players not excelling.
Bundesliga?
Yeah, Bundesliga.
The Bundesliga. So we've got Timo Werner, we've got Kai Havertz. So the difference between going from Germany to the Premier League from an expected statistics perspective, from this guy's analysis, it's a minus 38%. So you're basically losing a third of their XG and their XA in really simplistic terms. That's like super simplifying the model. So there is a massive impact on moving from league to league. The two leagues that I think are very, very good from a league to the Premier League, I think Portugal is insanely good. Like Portugal is top tier at the moment, similarly to France. I think France and Portugal are two leagues where Premier League clubs should recruit for. And I think you look at the Portuguese second league, you look at the French second league as well, both really, really good. But you have to understand, that like we're saying, it's really hard to model that. Like it's difficult to translate that league to league because at the end of the day, there's only a finite amount of players that have gone over. But there is the Bundesliga tax on forwards. It's apparent.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because obviously Man United in the last few years, we've bought 3 attackers from Dortmund in Kagawa, Mkhitaryan and Sancho, who have all, if I put it kindly, failed.
Yeah.
But one player who hasn't failed this season, who I'd like to talk about and get your opinion on, is Kobbie Mainoo, who has, well, this is definitely his big breakthrough season at United. He's been very impressive in the centre of midfield. We spoke on the last pod about him potentially being called up to the England squad and even making the England squad for the Euros. What do you make of his breakthrough and make of his chances of potentially getting the call up from Gareth?
I think it was always coming. I think the big thing that Kobbie did over the summer was grow. Like he looked at the end of last season, he looked quite small. He looked like a 17-year-old. This season, he looks big. He looks like he's put weight on. Looks like he can handle the Premier League. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Remember Angel Gomez?
Yeah.
Similarly, Angel Gomez technically is much better than Mainoo. And that's not saying Mainoo's bad technically. It's just saying the level of Gomez was ridiculous. But didn't have the physicality, didn't have the strength, didn't have that ability to get around the pitch. And I think with Mainoo, it's come at the perfect time. I think United needed a central midfielder. From a recruitment perspective, they should have bought like 2 or 3, over the last few years, and they never did that. But the way that he's come on, and I do think he is more of a number 8 than a number 6. I think at number 6, he did a job for Manchester United for a bit, but you could see him drifting in out of games. That lad's 18. You'd expect that. He's not a seasoned professional like Casemiro. But I think what we're starting to see is real quality on the ball, is quality in decision-making. Went to the West Ham game at the weekend, and there was just moments where almost the game slowed down for him and the game was really fast for everyone else, where he slipped a few tackles, played forward or made the right decision. And there was something in the sense of almost a Paul Scholes level of understanding of football where he's just very, very aware. And I think in comparison to maybe a Paul Pogba, a United academy player that's been bought from Le Havre and came through the academy, Mainoo's got the brains. He's got the brains now. He's got the consistency already from a decision-making perspective. And I don't know where he can't go. And that's the beauty of it. We all saw the winner against Wolves. Like, that is unbelievable. The lad's 18. It's a clutch moment. The lad's not supposed to be here for scoring goals and getting assists, but he's just out of nothing, gone through and slotted it away. That is the level of Mainoo. We work with a club called Fletcher Moss in Manchester that's had the likes of Rashford, Lingard, Danny Welbeck, I think, came through there. They had Kobbie train with them. And one of the things that one of the head coaches, Dave, said to me was like, he's very much like Paul Pogba in terms of how he plays the game right now. Like street footballer, can beat you 1v1, can beat you in the dribble, and he'll make it. And he would have made it in any academy in the world. And that's kind of almost the failings, but the brilliance of Manchester United right now. Like Mainoo is a player that will get through at any time. He's generational in a sense of his ability. Man United need to start creating players that are of a similar ilk, of a similar quality consistently, and then they'll become a successful football club again. In terms of England, the worst thing I would say for Mainoo is to go and play for England over the summer for himself. I think the best thing for England would be to have him in the squad. But you've got to remember his age. You've got to remember that he had a massive growth spurt last summer. Need to manage that. Need to manage his minutes. Need to manage his exposure to football to get the longevity out of him. Look, if England want to have Mainoo as a 10, 15 year career, you can't be throwing him in like a Theo Walcott. You can't be making him the pinnacle of it. We've seen that with X amount of players over the years. So I think it's got to be patience. I think if he's in the squad, fantastic. Would I say, should he start right now? No, he probably should take the summer off and manage himself and manage his fitness. That's from a Manchester United perspective. From Southgate's perspective, yeah, why not? Take the guy. He's a brilliant footballer. Why would you not want a player of that quality?
Dave, I watched your Xabi Alonso analysis on YouTube yesterday. Mind-bogglingly thorough. For an eye test man like me, it opened my eyes significantly, and you've convinced me that he's the second coming of Jesus Christ. He's a mix between Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp. So I think I know the answer to this question, but do you think, obviously he's at Leverkusen at the moment, do you think he can transfer that over and be a success in the Premier League, and would he be a good fit at your Manchester United?
No, he'd be a bad fit at Manchester United because he played for Liverpool, and unfortunately football is like that. So no, I wouldn't want Xabi Alonso at Manchester United. Do I think he is the best candidate by a country mile for Liverpool? Yes, absolutely. He is by far the best manager they could get on the market. If they get him, that Liverpool will be as competitive as they are under Klopp. The one thing with Xabi is he's stumbled on a brilliant system at Dortmund. Like Eric Ten Hag, he's kind of come out and said, there's different players at Liverpool, we might play a different way. I'd argue the counter in a sense of the reason why it's working for Leverkusen is because of this ingredient, and that ingredient. So sometimes it's better to not have to change for the players, but keep some sort of identity for yourself. And I think with Liverpool, one of the things that I've thought about for a long time is them switching to a back five, just to change the dynamic, to change how they play, to change what they do. And you think about the players like Grimaldo. If you watch Grimaldo is probably the best left fullback in the world right now. Is the way that he carries the ball, passes, he's brilliant. Trent Alexander-Arnold is a very, very similar player. That fits in. Robertson is a very high and wide left back, same as Frimpong. So those parts of the system work. Midfield, they've got players that probably, McAllister and Caicedo, I think, have been the most misanalyzed players in the world. Like, both of them have been bought to be single pivots. Both of them played at Brighton for how long in a double pivot? Like, sometimes that misalignment's bad. Saying that, Alonso plays a double pivot. McAllister would fit in perfectly. Szoboszlai could play high, could play low. It would really work out. And, you build what Alonso's built in Leverkusen in the Premier League, it will be very successful. They do everything right. They press right, they play right, they create right, they score goals. The goals are spread through the team. So not for Man United, for Liverpool would be absolutely spot on.
Dave, I just want to go back to a point you said. You said you're at the West Ham game, and I sometimes at half-time will have a look where you do the sort of 2-3 player analysis of United, their breakdown of their stats, then a bit of an overall summary sentence about them. How are these stats collected? Are you there writing these things down? Are there systems that use AI to track these games? And then if that is the case, if it's not someone sat in the ground, when you look at like Sky Bet, where they've got Opta stats for paying out on bets and tracking the match shots and the shots on target and the offsides, all of that, how is that all being collated and collected?
So that they do it with a team of analysts, in a sense of I think they have 3 people that do it. They have a guy that's a control guy. They have one team that is the home team, one team does the away team, and it's all done on screen. It's a bit like if you watch anyone play like, I know, like League of Legends or something like that, where they're on they're crazy on the keyboards, are getting it done and so forth. We work with Y Scout, so we've got a kind of Y Scout license, and that's kind of where we get our data from and our numbers from and so forth. But that's obviously an analysis platform as well. So, any event you've got in the Premier League, you want to look at Kobe Maino's passes in the last 3 games, you can go and have a look at that. So we kind of get it from there. Obviously, from an AI perspective, that is going to be the future. That's where football stats are going to go. And I think it's only a matter of time before that's kind of launched out and so forth. But, very much, using data, having a look at who works well. And, sometimes you see something that I might feel differently on. There's players such as Diogo Dalot that really splits opinion, and I find it very strange. I think he's a very good footballer. And I think with him, like fullback-wise, he's a young fullback, and his stats are very, very good. I think he's a very good football player. I know him personally, and he's a good person. He's a person that wants to learn. He's a person that wants to improve. Sometimes his stats split opinion, and it's sort of like, what? I don't know why. Like, yeah, okay, cool. Right, he's made one mistake. Or let's say this season he was bad against Newcastle. He'd probably admit that. but he's probably been Man United's most consistent player. I thought he was brilliant against West Ham United. The block after the Maguire mistake was world class. And that's kind of like where sometimes you tweet about a player, people get annoyed about it. All right, cool, fine. That's, I'm just...
Do you think there's a little bit in that, Dave, where like, I'll take the Newport second goal as an example. Dalot from a stats might have completed all of his passes and, had a couple shots on target and,
Love this example.
All that sort of things. But that one where Anthony's tracking him back and the cross comes in and people say that Dalot's not going out to press him and is out of position.
Right.
Would that be a stat that would be shown?
Here we go. What do Man United fullbacks do when the ball's wide?
As it, like, tuck in?
From a tactical perspective, they basically sit on the edge of the box. You can see it. You can see it consistently. Luke, it annoys me. It's one of those things that I don't agree with. I think you want the fullback out there. You want to be stopping the cross, getting into the box. Next time you watch Man United, the fullbacks do that quite a lot. So sometimes, from a stats perspective, if we were analysing that, is that right or wrong? It's right if the manager tells you not to do it, right? So from a stats perspective, if we were building a model, how many times does your fullback go out to close down a winger? We could do that. Then we could do how many times has the fullback been beaten by the winger 1v1? But honestly, if you, like, that's one of the things where you're like, sometimes it's out of, like, it's a team instruction thing that the player has to do. And I think it's quite consistent with Erik Ten Hag's Man United. I don't agree with it. I think it's garbage, but it's something there. That goal is a great goal. How is it scored? Like, which part of the penalty box is it scored?
6 yard box.
The striker running to the near post.
Yes. There is a player there that is a World Cup winning defender that's won multiple Champions Leagues that doesn't react to a League Two striker running in the near post. Like, if Diogo Dalot is tactically instructed not to press the fullback and the centre half is supposed to track the run at the near post, doesn't do that, gets a yard on him, then the goalkeeper like chucks it in his own goal, don't make it like... I'd stand there and it would have hit me. So you've got a goalkeeper mistake, you've got Rafael Varane not tracking a man, like letting a man run off him, and then you've got the tactical instruction side of things. Sometimes with Diogo Dalot and Luke Shaw and the left back and the right back, whoever's playing, Wan-Bissaka, it's a little bit more than what we understand as fans in a sense. And sometimes it's worth looking a little deeper and being like, okay, right. Yeah. Like, for me, that goal, like, number one, you could stop it at source. I agree. Number two, you can stop it with Rafael Varane defending properly. Number three, you can stop it with the fullback coming in. Or even before that, Anthony, if he does his job properly and wins a tackle there, you've not even got that problem. But it's really easy for football fans to see that first bit and go, that's the issue. And that's where, like, sometimes it's worth, with the eye test, going, hold on a minute. If this is consistently happening, I've seen this multiple times, yet your centre-half has been beaten on the near post, that is an issue. And that's where I'd look at that goal and go, Rafael Varane, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
How is he run off you? Like, he's not fast, he's not quick. Like, you've anticipated this situation how many times in your career, yet you're on your heels. And that goes to like Man United, the centre halves are a humongous problem because of how they're not mobile. None of them are in the prime of their careers, and they've got big problems apart from Lisandro. And we know how much of an impact Lisandro has. Like, he is. I'd argue that he's United's best defender. I'd probably say he's the best player on the ball at Man United. I'd say he's up there with Bruno Fernandes. I think he's probably even better than Bruno Fernandes in terms of his passing range, how he carries, and how well that he can spot opportunity and play through the lines. He's not there. Man United are garbage at the back. They just are. Like, they're so bad. They can't play a high line. I was watching a clip today on the pressing, and it was like horrendous. I suppose you guys have seen the Jamie Carragher Arsenal example from this weekend, where the two centre backs are basically like in midfield and they're pressing super high. Like, yeah. This was the polar opposite. This was Harry Maguire and Rafael Varane basically just stood there like, we don't know where we are. The fullback's about 20 miles over there. Where's my man? What am I doing? I can't step up. The space between the lines is so big. And you're like, for me, that's the biggest problem with United.
Yeah, so just on that positive note about Lisandro Martinez, obviously we're not going to be with him for the next 2 months, and we certainly won't be with him for the Villa game on Sunday, which is a massive game. I think they're currently in fourth, obviously in those Champions League spaces. United aspire to be in those spaces. So just one last question today, because obviously we've taken enough of your time, and thanks so much for that, Dave. But what's your prediction for that game? Obviously, it's a massive game. I think we went to Villa Park last year for Unai Emery's first game in charge and got absolutely dominated. So what are your hopes and predictions for that one, Dave?
It's tough. I might be there. I might have a ticket in the away end, so I'm excited for it. I think one of the big things with Villa, if you look at Villa's worst performances from an expected goals against metric, they were really bad in both of the games against Newcastle, the 5-1 and was it 3-1 or 3-0 last week?
Yeah, sharp rose.
Yeah, so both of those games was the worst defensive performance from Villa. What was quite interesting, it was similar to the Man United game at home, where they basically were hitting the balls in behind the channels, into the wings, to Gordon and Almiron and Jacob Murphy. Man United do that. So from an offensive perspective, United will get chances. They will get chances behind the Villa backline. Emery will squeeze high. I don't imagine he's going to change that. The issue for Manchester United was Villa obviously messed with them, didn't they? Remember the Leon Bailey behind Andre Onana? Andre Onana basically chucked the ball in his own net. Problem. United need to be far better at set pieces. Defensively, it's going to be a problem. Ollie Watkins versus Man United strikers Man United's defenders, is nightmare stuff. With Lozandro, great. With those two, although whoever he plays there, I'd rather see Casemiro play centre back than any of the guys we've got at the moment. I really would. That's going to be an issue. Villa will get chances. United will get chances. It's going to be a really open game. Could be another 3-2, could be another 4-2, could be a 2-2 draw. I think that's the nature of it. Man United need to win this game if they want to get top four. This is a must-win. They don't win this game, they've got no chance of getting into Europe next season from a Champions League perspective. You look at the Premier League table now. What the gap between Manchester United and Villa is currently 8 points. This is when you need to start winning these games. This is when you need to start kicking on. So it's a huge, huge game for United. For Villa, if I was Emery, I go into that game. A draw is great. A draw keeps that distance. It keeps that gap. Yeah, Spurs may go ahead of them in the league, but I think Manchester United are going to be a threat. They've been so bad this season that there's going to be a point where they get a little bit better, and that hopefully will be at Villa Park. But you never know with these guys. You just never know.
So what is the prediction there, Dave? 2-2, 3-2 either way? Who's winning the game?
3-2 United, I'm going to go with.
Love it.
I think it's going to be it's going to be stressful. Make sure you have a nice, if you're at home, get yourself a cocoa, sit on the sofa, just relax yourself. I'm probably going to be at the game, so it won't matter. I'll be within the mix. It'll be great. Look, you'll have the ecstasy, you'll have the frustration, you'll have everything. But yeah, I think it's going to be an open game just because of the styles of both teams and how good and bad both teams are in certain phases. Like Man United struggled for the first half an hour, probably first 45 minutes with Villa's two 10s coming inside. That's something that Villa have done all season. It's not a new thing. Why did Man United have to wait till half time to adjust that? That's one of the problems with Eric Ten Hag. Doesn't adjust things in a pragmatic manner in game. It just takes too long. Teams have 20, 15 minutes to basically do the same thing over and over again, and then he reacts. That has to be the start point. Whoever's playing fullback on John McGinn, whichever side John McGinn goes on, needs to follow him into midfield and play in midfield when they've got the ball in those situations. That's how to stop Aston Villa, block those 2 10s out. Then you've got to win the second balls when they go long. And they're really important factors. Hopefully Eric's learned. He learned in the second half.
Into the pod, Dave.
Hopefully. Well, I've not met Eric yet, but there's a few things I'd just like to speak to him about. And the Villa game was one of them where it was why is it taking you so long to change things? We actually changed our entire pressing structure off the back of that game to this point in the season where we've gone 4-1-4-1 because that dodgy 4-2-3-1 narrow shape, it was awful. And that's something that Eric needs to look, at Ajax, they had all the ball. They had 70% possession. They were never playing a game where they were sitting deep. If this Man United team sits deep quite a bit, that's by design from Eric Ten Hag. Okay, so make the defensive system better because at the moment it's not. Anyway, I digress.
Dave, we'll finish on the positive note of United 3, Aston Villa 2 at Villa Park. But Dave, been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to the pod and for giving us some of your time, and hopefully get you back on in the summer, do a Euro special or something like that and get some free line stats from you.
Yeah, hopefully, Kobe Maino, will be chilling on the beach in wherever he wants to be chilling, not playing in the Euros in the summer, and come back nice and fresh for a new season at Manchester United with maybe some good signings.
Cheers, Dave. Thanks very
Cheers,
much.
guys.
All right, boys, let's move on to the rest of the Premier League then. So, Lauro, West Ham versus Arsenal. Obviously, West Ham coming off the back of 3-0 at Old Trafford. Arsenal had probably their biggest win of the season against Liverpool. A game, West Ham away, that isn't an easy one these days. But I think with how Arsenal done against Liverpool, they'll be looking to carry on that momentum and pick up all three at West Ham.
They'll definitely be looking to, won't they? And I don't think they've got a choice now. They've had their little blip, and if there's another one, they'll be out of it. So they need to go to the London Stadium, pick up all 3 points, no questions asked. They've got the quality to do it. They've won there before. And this is the business end of the season where we need to see Arsenal come to the fore now if they're going to be a proper title contender. So absolutely no excuses. It's a difficult game, but if you want to be Premier League champions and you need to beat West Ham, you need to beat West Ham, and they should be able to do that.
One of the sides that they're obviously up against in that title race, Tomo, Man City, we just touched on how impressive they were against Brentford. They've got Everton at home. We've obviously spoken about the embarrassment of riches they've got up front, but Everton will obviously come give it a go. I've read that Onana might be back in, who's obviously an important player for them, but obviously fully expecting Man City to pick up all 3. And will you be sticking with Foden as captain?
No, I'll be bringing in Haaland as my captain. I think he looked a bit rusty, to be fair, on Monday. Obviously, he's just come back from injury. But I don't expect Foden to go and bag a couple or 3 or against Everton again, just because it's rare for a midfielder to notch a hat-trick. But yeah, look, there's nothing much more to add to that game other than City are going to batter Everton.
I just think sometimes City have these games, don't they? Like Brentford last year, where it's just. And there's been games where like Palace have gone a couple goals up. I know City have come back in some of them, but it almost feels like such a Man City home win that might be one where they just find themselves sort of 1-0 down against Everton.
Lampard got a result there last year, and it's the sort of thing that Pep would do to like drop Foden now. Oh, no, you can't score a hat-trick at Brentford. He wasn't in the right space to receive the ball from Doku in the second half, so he's dropped, and in comes Grealish. So I wouldn't bet on anything that Pep's going to do. And Everton are a funny team sometimes. They can go and get a result. So, either 7-0 or 1-0.
Tomo, did I read something that Grealish was annoyed with the lack of game time or not coming off of the bench and's been alleged to have left training early? Is that just speculation? Anything in that?
Well, I don't know if it's true or not, but obviously it's just purely speculation, like you get with these things. But Guardiola has always done that with his wingers. I think if you think back of when Sterling was at the club, Mahrez was at the club, they always dipped in and out of the team, and whoever wasn't performing at a world-class level at that moment in time might have 6 weeks out of the team. And it's just happening that way with Jack Grealish a little bit this season. It's probably gone on for a little bit longer than he thought, but it's up to him when he gets back into the team to basically be unplayable and undroppable. Because at the minute, his performances have been okay, but Doku's have been better probably.
Yeah, indeed. Couple of other Prem games just to mention, boys. So the people keeping the pace at the top. Liverpool home to Burnley, Tottenham home to Brighton. So they'll both be looking to pick up all 3 points. As you say, we just touched on Arsenal at West Ham, City at home to Everton, Liverpool, Burnley, Tottenham, Brighton. But it's starting to get towards that business end of the season where dropping any points is a significant step back in the Premier League title race. So look forward to seeing those games. Boys, just want to touch on something before we move on to the EFL about the news that's broken today about the blue card. Tomo, can you just give a bit of an update about what that news is and what that's set to mean?
Okay, yeah. So it looks like football is going to introduce blue cards as a way of testing these sin bins. The blue card will be shown to a player for cynical fouls or dissent to officials. And if you get a blue card, it means you'll be sin bin for 10 minutes. Now, if you want my opinion on that, I think it's absolute fucking horseshit. Sorry for the language, but I just think what we need right now, with all of this VAR controversy and referees getting, getting criticised week after week, what we need is less things for the officials to do, and we need less VAR and less, interventions into the game. We need to simplify everything. Simplify the handball rule, simplify the offside rule. We need to simplify everything. We don't need to add other things into the mix. And the idea of a blue card and a sin bin, it basically means that if you tell the ref to fuck off because of a decision, you get sent off for 10 minutes. So your team will then play in a low block for 10 minutes and ruin the spectacle for the fans for those 10 minutes. And then what happens is, then after 10 minutes happens, another player on the other side gets a blue card, and then it becomes a 10v11 the other way, and they just sit in another low block. So then potentially you might have 30, 40 minutes of a game where you've got just teams sitting in, playing a low block, and it just ruining the spectacle. I just think what these officials and these decision makers try and do, they try and justify their existence. And it's like a game of whack-a-mole. So they try and solve these issues that come up. But the reality of it is they solve them with issues. They solve them with solutions that create 10 more problems. And then it's just a never-ending cycle. And it just seems to be that way. So I just leave football alone, please.
Is there anything on, if you get a blue card and come back on, are you then on a booking? Like if you then were to bring someone down and foul them, do you get a second yellow and you're sent off? Like if you got given a second blue card in the space of a game, are you off for the rest of the game? Do you know how they're planning on making it work?
No, just that they're planning on introducing it as a trial next season, potentially in the smaller competitions like the Women's FA Cup. And there was talk of even introducing it to the Men's FA Cup as well, and just seeing if it works. I hope the trial goes terribly and it's never introduced in the Premier League or Champions League. The only, positive from it is that already the president of UEFA, that Alexander Sefrin, has come out and said he doesn't want it. But the problem with that is basically he doesn't have the power to stop it if the decision makers at IFAB change the rules of football to include the blue card.
Laura,
I'm very, very sad about this. I think refereeing and the rules of football is a space that is subject to quite a lot of confusion and poor decision making over the last couple of years. And I had assumed as a fan that over the last couple of months, as it's got worsened and worse and worse and worse, that the world of refereeing would have been in a room trying to come up with a way to enhance the use of VAR and get better at making decisions from it, or scrap it altogether. So to hear that they've come out of those meetings with a card coloured blue, that means a player is going to be sent to the touchline for 10 minutes instead of doing anything about what's already a catastrophe within our game, is extremely disheartening as a football fan. So I don't think it's been thought through very much. I agree with Teagal that we don't need anything else confusing the referees that already aren't sure how to do their job. And I've got lots of questions as well. I.e., you get a blue card for dissent. Does a goalkeeper get one? Or is he allowed to bellow fuck off from the touchline? Because if not, you just tell your referee, if you're angry, instead of going to the referee, go to the goalkeeper and say, call the referee a couple of names, will you? Because you can't get sent off.
That's an interesting point, that actually. Like, if he made a cynical foul, do you sin bin your keeper? Because you're not making a substitution then. So do you chuck your centre back and goal for 10 minutes and then stop the game? And
if you're on a yellow card, can you get a blue card? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. The point of the yellow and red card system is basically not being utilised correctly by the referees. Otherwise, it would work. If they just booked everyone who showed dissent and then booked them again if they told them to fuck off, then it's a red card. Players would stop, but they just don't. And there's no consistency. And then And now they're sort of introducing this blue card to try and solve a problem that's already solvable with the yellow and red card. They just don't use the current rules properly. It's an absolute joke. They're ruining the beautiful game that I love. And like Laura said, I'm equally as sad about it. And I just hope this never sees the light of day.
I'd just say I got a little bit of insight into this in the league that I was playing footy with introduced this, and I think it's still running. You just don't see it that often anymore. But dissent was basically in the level that I was playing. There wasn't any blue card, but you could be sin bin for 10 minutes where the ref would effectively give you a yellow card, but like point you to the dugout, and then you'd go off for 10 minutes. And to start with, a bit similar to this year, how we started seeing a real uptick in yellow cards because they were looking to stamp down on stuff. There's a real like uptick in people going off for dissent, but you just don't really see it too much more. And people, that isn't because people are like, oh, I don't want to get sin bin, so they're showing the refs more respect. I think the refs have just got laps with it. And I think that would end up happening with this. You'd see a real uptick in blue cards getting administered. And then all of a sudden it might drop off. And then you've got people in the VAR room going, well, is that not a cynical foul? Should he have been sin binned? Or it looks like he shouted at the ref there or showed dissent. So why didn't he get a blue card? And then more of the talk after the game and on the radio and on podcasts and things like that will be around thresholds for blue cards. And was that a bad decision? And if they'd have got a blue card, then they'd have been down for 10 men for the last 10 minutes and that could have changed the game. I just think, as you boys have said, it adds another layer of complexity to the game.
It adds another layer of complexity to VAR as well, because at the moment VAR can review red card decisions but not yellows. Can they review blues? Because if you're the opposition team, you're going to want the other team down to 10 men for 10 minutes, aren't you?
You could say, oh, that's not a cynical foul. He stumbled and tripped him. You know, what's the threshold for cynical? You know, it looks like he's dragged him back, but he actually hasn't. So can you then review a blue, as you say? It just seems a ridiculous choice to try and bring in.
What I want to say is, what do these decision makers and lawmakers, what is their end game? Because they're trying to create this perfect game where nobody makes mistakes, nobody makes fouls, no passions in the game, so you can't question any decision. The beauty of football is that players make mistakes, players make fouls, and it's messy sometimes. It's not like, I just don't get what the end game is, where they just keep bringing in new rules to overcomplicate things, and we don't need more sort of camera shots of the officials. Like, imagine Mike Dean with a blue card. He'd absolutely shag having a blue card, wouldn't he? And it's just like, what we need is less officials and less officials being the talking point of the weekend, and more just about the football. And this blue card introduction just seems like that sort of the reverse of that, and it's a shame.
But why is it blue as well?
Yeah, I know. Just give them a yellow, but like gesture to the touchline that they're getting sin bin. Tell them they're getting sin bin. You can already see some of these smarmy refs, can't you? Just pulling a blue from their top pocket and not looking at the player, just sort of brandishing it and sending him off. But they're just going to get a mouthful of abuse for giving the blue card. So then are you upgrading it to a red? It's not going to work.
And quite often refs can be surrounded by multiple players all shouting stuff.
Yeah.
Is that VAR going to come and they're going to have to like lip sync who said fuck off and who hasn't? And then 3 or 4 players from each team going to have to go off at any given time? Do you know what I mean?
Imagine that.
Absolute shower of shit.
4 players surrounding a ref because of a penalty decision. They do actually give him dissent, so they're down to 7 men. But then VAR look at the penalty and it actually wasn't, and they overturn it. But those guys have still told the ref to piss off, so they're still dissent. This
is exactly what I mean. They're trying to solve one problem but creating 20 more. And
so what we're saying is... Go on.
I was just going to say, there's no one in that room with them pointing out all of these things that we're just saying. Surely there's someone in the room and with the decision makers going, yeah, but this decision about blue cards will create this problem, that problem, another problem. And what about what happens with in this instance or that incident or that circumstance? but they just do it anyway because they're just trying to justify their existence, trying to justify their big salaries. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Boys, let's leave that there. Let's go to a few leagues in the EFL that are blessed without having to deal with VAR and some of these stupid refereeing choices. Championship, Loro, Leicester go to Watford. Is that a game as a Leeds or a Southampton or an Ipswich fan that you earmark as one potentially for Leicester to drop some points?
I think it's a game that no one's interested in. They're just gone, aren't they? When I look at the league table now, I don't look at Leicester in the slightest. I just look at Southampton and Ipswich, really.
Yeah.
And whoever the next one in front of you is. But it's a 23-team league now, isn't it? Leicester have gone. There's no point speaking about them anymore. It is a procession. And well done, Leicester. And Leicester fans, I hope you're very happy. You've won the league. And the rest of us are here trying to pick up the pieces, trying to deal with Russell Martin's Southampton, who haven't lost since September, which they've never done before. So yeah, I'm not bothered about the Foxes against the Hornets. What will be, will be.
I thought you were going to go full come done with me then.
Yeah, it did seem it, didn't it?
Yeah.
On that, Southampton, they're home to Huddersfield. I've seen that Russell Martin is up for his 4th Manager of the Month nomination in a row, 4 months consecutively, but hasn't won any of them. And it's likely that Daniel Farke's going to win this month. So just kind of shows that Southampton are not always winning every game each month, and other teams are keeping up the pace with them, but they're just on a elongated run. Just touched on Leeds there, Loro. Leeds play Rotherham. Highlighted that they're both sides from Yorkshire. Would that be classified as a Yorkshire derby? Is there any bad blood between Leeds and Rotherham fans from being a Yorkshire derby, or not really?
Well, being the Yorkshireman that I am, I know all about that. I think geographically, obviously, it's a derby, but I mean, I personally haven't got any ill blood towards the Millers, and I think Leeds have probably got bigger fish to fry in terms of local rivals when we play them in the forms of maybe the Sheffield sides. And I mean, Bradford is the big derby for Leeds, but obviously haven't been in the same league for years. So, no, I don't think there's much heightened on that one because they're both in Yorkshire. But obviously, it's another must-win game for Leeds.
Other sides that are up near there, Tomo, Ipswich versus West Brom. Ipswich in 4th, West Brom in 5th. Obviously, Ipswich plummeting a little bit. Their form's taking a battering. They're on at 12:30, and probably a game that they need to win at home to West Brom to stop the rot if they still want to be in contention for the automatics of how Southampton and Leeds are going.
Yes, it is a big game for them, just given the fact that, well, every game's big at this stage of the season, but given the fact that West Brom are so close to them. I actually don't think their last result, I know they lost, but it was like they gave the ball away quite cheaply 3 times, individual errors. And if they can cut that out, they've got Kiefer Moore now, who obviously scored twice the other day, so he's hit the ground running. It feels like they could turn a corner here with a big win and a statement win against West Brom, their promotion rivals for sure.
Bit of manager news, so I'm not sure if it's confirmed yet, boys, for the Championship. It looks like Blackburn set to part ways with their manager, and Laura Eustace, someone who we've spoken about throughout the history of the pod, really, ever since his Birmingham sacking. He looks likely to be the man to come in. Blackburn were up and around the playoff positions. He obviously got Sammy Smodics, who's right up there in the goal scorers charts, which you alluded to on the last pod. And in Eustace, if he comes in, might be a force again.
Yeah. I feel a little bit for Yondale Thomason, the outgoing Blackburn manager. A, because it seemed that John Eustace was coming in to replace him before I'd even heard that he'd been sacked or Blackburn had parted company with him. But B, I don't think he's done a poor job. Blackburn don't spend money the same as quite a lot of the big guns in the Championship, and they have flirted in and around the upper estrials. They were very close to sneaking into the playoffs last season. And they've got a couple of shining leading lights there, like Sammy Smodics, who's had a great year. But sometimes in the Championship, because everything's so close, a couple of losses or a bad month, and all of a sudden you look like you're doing poorly. And I don't think that's the case. Having said that, John Eustace is a perfect fit now, I think. I think he's a manager that will do well on more of a modest budget in relation. He's got good pedigree now in the Championship in terms of what he did at Birmingham, and I think he'll get the best out of Blackburn. So not a bad appointment, but slightly disappointed to see the back of Yondale Thomason.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the table. They've done okay in like cup competitions, but they're only 5 points off the bottom three now, and I think it's only one league win in 10 or 11 for them. And they've got Stoke at the weekend, who are 2 places behind them in 20th, but only a point ahead. Obviously, Birmingham have made their move and brought Tony Mowbray in, so potentially a couple sides there that they're thinking might get out of the trouble. And Blackburn really need to be careful not to get dragged into that, albeit I think Rotherham, Sheffield United and QPR and Huddersfield are poorer sides than them. I just think that they're maybe hitting panic mode a little bit and think we need a manager in now to keep us in this league and grow again next year.
Yeah, I don't think it's a disgusting sacking, like a few of them have been in the Championship this season, but I just felt a bit sorry for him. Maybe it's because he'd come across like a nice guy, and I don't think he's done a dreadful job. Having said that, like you say, if you're 5 points off the relegation zone in football management at a club like Blackburn in the Championship, the writing's probably on the wall, isn't it? Although I don't think they'd be in any danger of going down. I think the 3 that are in the relegation zone at the moment are probably going to go.
Let's just do a wrap up of the rest of the EFL. Actually, a rare week where there's not too many big games in League One and League Two, but we'll just go through the fixtures that the kind of main protagonists in the league have. Portsmouth are away at Carlisle, Bolton are away at Northampton, and Peterborough away at Wickham. So they all are on their travels, but Derby are home to Shrewsbury, so they'll be hoping to pick up some points on some of those teams if they can drop some points away from home. And the main 3 sides, or top 3 in League Two, certainly they're away from home as well. Stockport go to Grimsby, Mansfield are at Forest Green, Barrow at Wimbledon, Wrexham are at home. So much like Derby, they'll be hoping to pick up some points there on those sides. But obviously we'll reflect on that on Monday and look ahead to some midweek action in League One and League Two. Laurie, just want to come to you. So last time we spoke, Yeovil had lost against Maidstone. Obviously you weren't too disappointed with it, with the run Yeovil have been on, and a side that potentially we'd earmarked to drop some points against, especially being on a plastic pitch. Back on our travels to Kent, as you alluded to last time, go to Tunbridge Angels, just how we're looking for that game and if we've got any returning faces from injury.
I think we're hoping to have Michael Smith back, which will be a big boost because he's our best player, really. But Tunbridge Angels have another plastic pitch, which we haven't really liked this season. 3 of our 4 losses have come on a plastic pitch. So, and I'm just it's weird, we're 10 points clear, but I'm just looking over my shoulder at Worthing thinking they're a really good side. I actually said to someone today, we're 10 points clear of Worthing and we beat them away. If we had lost that game, it would be 4 points. And we'd be 1 game away from being really, really tight. Yeah. So it's funny how it can swing even when you've got a massive lead. Having said that, the reverse fixture of Tunbridge Angels, we dealt with them really easily at home. They were one of the poorer sides I've seen. So hopefully they still are. And we need 3 points just to give ourselves that really, really, really nice breathing space that we've had for most of the last 3 or 4 months. So, hopeful for all 3.
Great stuff. Tom, I'm going to finish with you as well. You were this week's trivia question. So just if you want to put the listeners out of their misery and just quickly recap the question for us and then let us know what the answer was.
Yeah, so the question was, what linked the sides that finished 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th in the Premier League last season? And the answer was they're all from London.
And who were those sides?
Brentford, Tottenham, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, and one other.
West Ham?
It was Fulham. Yeah, West Ham finished to 16th, I believe.
Good stuff. Right, boys, that's all we got time for. We'll be back on Monday. As I say, we'll review all that weekend action, look ahead to the midweek and return of European football, and it's back to my turn on trivia. So cheers, boys. Pleasure as always. Have a good one.
Thanks, boys.